Hi, I'm Professor Hopf, and we're going to be starting our semester together thinking about the concepts of race and ethnicity. We'll be thinking about how the concept of race was constructed and how American society continues to perpetuate the idea of racial discrimination. So, let's get started. I want to start the semester with two very basic concepts that are used in the title of this course: that of race and ethnicity. Two main points that I want you to initially understand: that sociologists would see race as something that is socially constructed. What do I mean by that? Social constructionism, or the social construction of reality, is a theory of knowledge in sociology and communication theory. It examines the development of jointly constructed understandings of the world that form the basis for shared assumptions about reality. It assumes that things are not as finite as we might make them out to be, and that oftentimes that labels or understanding of words and the meanings of those labels arises through a social process. Ethnicity, on the other hand, is referring to one's group identification. An ethnic group is a category of people who identify with each other based on common ancestral, cultural, social, or national experiences. Ethnicity often follows your ancestry. It's something that is passed on through the family experience and the people that your family associates with. So, an ethnic group or ethnicity is a category of people who identify with each other based on common ancestral, social, cultural, or national experiences. Unlike most other social groups or statuses, ethnicity is an inherited status. It's important to know that often people don't understand that there is a difference between race and ethnicity. Race could be thought of something that socially constructs and that revolves around one's physical characteristics. Assumptions that people think someone belongs to a racial group because they share certain physical characteristics or differences. But for the most part, scientists agree that there is no real difference between people, that the genetic differences between races don't really exist. The concept of race is thus a social construct. Ethnicity, on the other hand, is cultural. This often includes things like language, religion, nationality, ancestry, dress, and customs. So, with that as a starting point, I'd like to tell you a little bit about where we'll be going with our introductory chapter. It's divided into three main sections, beginning with how the concept of race has been constructed over time. Starting in the 1700s, scientists attempted to define and categorize people on the basis of race. These racial definitions have shifted and changed over time, often revolving around struggles for power and social status. The construct of race was further legitimatized through laws such as the one-drop rule, which defined a person as black if they even had one drop of blood from an African ancestor. Segregation also played a large historical role in legitimatizing racial differences and inequality. Our second section is going to turn to the main sociological theories and how each approaches the topic of racial inequality. Functional theory suggests that racial divisions serve a beneficial purpose in society, whereas conflict theory suggests that racial divisions are the direct result of one group exploiting and maintaining control over another. Symbolic interactionists focus more on individuals rather than groups, and how individuals act to reproduce patterns of inequality. Finally, critical race theory directs attention to the laws and power relationships that maintain racial inequality. Along those lines, conflict theory considers who has power and who does not, whereas critical race theory focuses more on the structural systems of power where conflict theory focuses more on how power is distributed amongst groups and class struggles. The chapter concludes with a brief discussion of the social and political effects of racial categories in the United States today. While the laws have changed and outright discrimination on the basis of race is illegal, significant racial gaps remain in the areas of unemployment, income, housing, and educational opportunities. So let's go a little deeper into this idea that race is socially constructed. The basic premise is that race is not real. We think of it as a real characteristic, but the concept only exists because by and large, people tend to believe that they can categorize others based on their physical characteristics. Conflict theorists and critical race theorists would agree that these distinctions are maintained so that certain groups can maintain social and economic power. More than 100 years ago, American sociologist W.E.B. Du Bois was concerned that race was being used as a biological explanation for what he understood to be a social and cultural differences between different populations of people. He spoke out against the idea of white and black as discrete groups, claiming that these distinctions ignored the scope of human diversity. Science today would favor Du Bois. Today, the mainstream belief among scientists is that race is a social construct without biological meaning. And yet, you might still open a study on genetics in a major scientific journal and find categories like white and black being used as biological variables. As I said before, we tend to lump physical characteristics into groups and identify those physical characteristics with certain geographical regions and then apply a label of race.